Mr. Mees is the co-founder of Rocket Hub, one of the world's largest and most recognized crowdfunding brands. Brian has lectured on the topic of crowdfunding at conferences around the world. Recognized as an industry voice, Brian has had the opportunity to consult with the US Securities and Exchange Commission on how to regulate the emerging crowdfunding industry and has hosted roundtables for President Barack Obama's Council on Jobs and Competitiveness. Additionally, Rocket Hub partnered with the US Department of State to support innovative solutions to some of the world's toughest challenges by accelerating projects awarded by the department's Alumni Engagement and Innovation Fund. The title of Mr. Mees' presentation is Crowdfunding Fuels Big Change. Mr. Mees.
All right. My name's Brian Mees, and I'm one of the co-founders of Rocket Hub, which is a global crowdfunding platform. But I have a confession to make. I actually did not start off my career looking to be a technology CEO. My background before starting Rocket Hub was in the world of the arts and creative media. I don't want to brag, but I'm a pretty awesome ukulele player. I've been playing in bands since I was in high school, and I still play in bands in New York City, where I've been living for the last 10 years. I went to undergrad for film school, and that perspective as a creative is actually really important because that's where this whole crowdfunding world began. I remember in the late 1990s, I was still in film school, and I was raising funds for one of my movie ventures. And I read about Darren Aronofsky out of New York City, who raised $60,000 from his community to make the movie Pi, which was a breakout indie hit, and now Darren Aronofsky is a major player in the Hollywood world. But he started in crowdfunding, and I thought, wow, this is in the late 1990s. I thought, wow, this is really an interesting model. A few years later, I saw a singer-songwriter named Jill Sobel. She got dropped from her record label in the early 2000s because they thought she didn't have a future anymore. So she looked to her fans to fund a very modest singer-songwriter record. She was looking to raise $10,000. She started a website called Fund Jill's Record. I heard about Jill on NPR after she had raised well over $100,000 and had to shut down the website because her fans were so excited about making this record happen, and they were spreading it spreading it to their friends, and this thing became kind of a media hit. And at that point, I knew crowdfunding was going to be a big thing. Not only in the world of the arts, but in the world of sciences and pro-social endeavors and entrepreneurship. So in 2009, my colleagues and I started Rocket Hub. I was back in graduate school in New York City, trying to figure things out. And I have another confession. I'm actually a surfer. I grew up in Florida, and I decided in 2009 to paddle out and catch a crowdfunding wave, and that's what I did. A couple of things about our platform. The platform itself launched in 2010, and after almost 5 years after running the company, we got acquired in a deal valued at around $15 million by a publicly traded company. And in the process, we raised millions of dollars for entrepreneurs, creatives, scientists all over the planet. And I developed a reputation of being able to speak on crowdfunding and educate folks on crowdfunding, which is one of my passions. And frankly, that's the most fun part of my role, is to be in places just like this, speaking about crowdfunding. I do a lot of these lectures all over the planet. I just was in Tokyo 2 days ago. And I have to say that this event is an exceptional event with the speakers that you've seen this morning. We've seen a lot of data, we've seen a lot of trends, we've seen a lot of really well-packaged communication. So I want to thank KPMG, and I want to thank Annie Rott for inviting me to be a part of this, and I want to thank each one of you for spending your day with us here to learn about the crowdfunding movement. And now my job is to kind of add another log on the fire. You've been hit with all these numbers and datas and different flavors of crowdfunding. So my role now is a little bit different and talk about some case studies from the front lines of the crowdfunding movement and kind of my front seat position as a platform operator on the front lines. We'll talk a little bit more about my work with the US government in the panel discussion, but I did have the honor of working with the Securities and Exchange Commission. We consulted with them on the Jobs Act and Title III specifically, which deals with unaccredited investors. And we've partnered with the US Department of State, we partnered with the White House, and we've published numerous papers. If you want to Google them, they're published by the SEC. You can Google Rocket Hub white papers, and you'll see our suggestions on how to implement crowdfunding, equity crowdfunding, in a way that's responsible from a regulatory perspective. So I think at this point, we have a pretty good idea of what crowdfunding is, no? We feel like we kind of know what crowdfunding is. Well, I'm going to challenge that a little bit. I'm going to define crowdfunding as an event that harnesses networks, funds, awareness, and feedback. And I want us to tuck a few of these words away because I'm going to come back to them. The word event, then of course, awareness and feedback, because those are dynamics that haven't been discussed yet, but they're really, really important to the world of crowdfunding. And I like to think of crowdfunding really as a new spin on an old idea. I like to say that Da Vinci plus social media equals crowdfunding. And what I mean by that is back in Da Vinci's day, he may have relied on a handful of wealthy patrons to foot the bill while he tinkered away and made some really cool stuff. And now a modern creator or a modern entrepreneur or a modern scientist can rely on social networks to fund them. And Dimitra pointed this out earlier this morning, that crowdfunding is actually deeply seated in us from a ritualistic perspective. We understand it. Even though the technology has shifted and the way we do it has changed, it still feels right to support ideas or to support ventures that excite us, that are meaningful to us, or maybe we know the folks that are involved, which is why we've seen this movement grow so fast. This is kind of how we got here, right? We got Da Vinci, keeping it real old school, and then the 1970s is when I really consider technology to first enter the crowdfunding picture. In the United States, we have two broadcasting models that are heavily reliant on crowdfunding. PBS, which is our public broadcasting system, and NPR, National Public Radio. They get a lot of their funding from the people, the audiences that tune in and watch their shows. So us modern crowdfunders really borrow two key pieces from this chapter, the 70s, 80s, 90s, and even now where they do pledge drives to keep certain programs on the air. And they personalize the ask for funds. So if you were to listen to the pledge drives, you might hear the host or the stars of the programs talking about the importance of your participation in the fund drive. And that's really important, is this personalization for the fundraising ask. And the other piece that we borrow from that chapter is getting the community involved in the crowdfunding side. And if you were to tune in to a PBS show, a television show, and you would see during their commercial breaks, there's usually a front person talking about the pledge drive and their goals and what they want to do with the funds and what programs the money is going to support. And in the background, kind of behind that person, you might see the local community kind of manning the phones, calling their list or calling their friends and family, kind of getting the community involved. And that's a really important piece of modern crowdfunding, because now we are more connected than we have ever been in human history. Social media hit its saturation point 2007 and 2008. Lo and behold, 2009, 2010 is the emergence of crowdfunding. Think of social media as this foundation on which social funding or crowdfunding is now playing on top. If you've got a great idea and a community that's engaged, you can now launch your ideas, launch your products faster than that's ever been possible. And that's really, really exciting. Rocket Hub has had the privilege of being in over 200 press pieces, including the big names like the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Guardian, BBC. And whenever one of these big splashy press pieces hit, I usually get a call from somebody that says, "Hey, I saw you in the Wall Street Journal. Who's your publicist? I feel like I see your brand a lot in the press." And I'll tell them, I'll say, well, really our publicists are our community. We don't have a full-time PR person. And the projects that are communicating innovative ideas and have interesting people behind them are very interesting to the press. They have been since our launch, and they still are now. I got an interesting call a couple of years into our founding our platform from A&E Networks, which at the time was a top 5 cable network station. And they were interested in our stories of entrepreneurship and innovation. And the call went something like this. Now keep in mind, I used to be a TV camera guy, loved making films. I hit a certain ceiling in my career in the world of broadcast and film. And out of the blue, a year and a half after starting Rocket Hub, I get a call from an Emmy Award-winning producer at a top 5 cable network. The call went something like this. Ring, ring. I pick up the phone. Rocket Hub. Hey, Brian, this is A&E Networks. We are really excited about the piece we just saw in the USA Today, and we are interested as a network in getting behind projects on your platform. We're interested in funding these projects. We're interested in showcasing them to our audience of about 100 million television sets across North America. We're thinking about taking you guys on a tour. We're thinking about making a documentary about you and your company. Is that the kind of partnership you might be interested in? I responded with, where are you right now? I will come to wherever you are right now. Where are you? Where this is going to happen. So I got so excited about this, and one of the roles I want to play today is how bigger companies are getting involved with the crowdfunding movement, and A&E is a great example of that. We had a 3-year engagement with them and did a variety of really cool things, including a flagship project, which I'll showcase, including a tour across North America that was a pitch competition, and also had some South by Southwest style panels involved with it. But at the core, the reason that we got these calls is because we have a community of folks that are doing really cool and interesting things. So, just the community building side is something that I'm very, very passionate about. And again, one of the reasons why I'm here this morning, or this afternoon. So, we've actually found that since we launched the platform, we started to collect a lot of data and figure out kind of what was the secret sauce of why some campaigns failed and why some campaigns succeeded. And it was really interesting when we started to look at kind of the information coming out of the successful campaigns. It didn't matter if it was a band raising money to launch their new CD or tour. It didn't matter if it was an entrepreneur looking to launch a food truck. It didn't matter if it was a scientist funding some kind of research. The core patterns of success with crowdfunding was the same across the board. Show of hands of the entrepreneurs in here that are looking to use crowdfunding at some point in their entrepreneurial careers. Okay. So this is the secret sauce of crowdfunding, especially with the rewards model. There'll be elements here that will work also with equity model. But with these elements, you can succeed. Without these, you will fail with crowdfunding. So definitely, I'm happy that you're going to get access to this information. We're going to look at some case studies that use the model very well. We'll talk about a case study that had to struggle a little bit with the model. But the 3 core elements of success for crowdfunding are the project, the network, and the goods for rewards-based crowdfunding. So the good news is that it's never been easier in a lot of ways to start a company. The costs are down. From an infrastructure perspective, you can leverage online technologies. You can work from home, you can work remotely, you can work from your iPhone. And as a result, there's a lot of noise online from folks launching things. I read a statistic that content is doubling every year online, which means we're just getting in a noisier and noisier and noisier world. So the question is, with all this information overload, how are we going to cut through the clutter as an entrepreneur launching something, or as an artist, or as a social entrepreneur? And the answer to that is we shift the emotional state of the audience. We shift the emotional state of the audience. How many people here have shared something online before? Is the stuff that you shared really dry and boring and dull? Or did it shift your emotional state? Maybe it was something funny. Maybe it was something very relevant to you as a parent. It could be all these different things, but I promise you that it was something that engaged you on an emotional level. So when you're looking to craft a crowdfunding campaign, you want to factor in that emotionality into your communication. Be great, make the statement, tell us why. We've polled our funders and realized that the number one reason that folks are attracted to funding projects is, number one, the people. They know the people, they like the people, they want to support the people, and they often want to support the mission behind the people, the why. So here's a case study of Josh B. out of Long Island. Him and his business partner built an outdoor game. Do y'all know the American game horseshoes, where you throw the horseshoe and it rings around the stake? Well, this is kind of a modern version of it. It's called Ramp Shot, and he built it with him and his friends. And his family was playing it, and it started to kind of catch on in his friends and family circle of Long Island. They would take it out to the beach. And one day they had the idea of commercializing this and selling it to the public. And for them, so they went and met with a regional manufacturer, and the manufacturer said, you're going to need around 20 grand to make these molds so we can kind of stamp out the product. You're going to need about $20,000 to make the molds. And he said, well, I don't have $20,000, but let me go to crowdfunding and see if I can sell enough in pre-orders to get what I need to mass produce this product. And so he raised over $25,000. He got some press in his local press. The local Long Island newspaper picked it up, said, hey, here's what somebody's doing that's really, really interesting. He also had some celebrity athletes tweeting it, because they met them at the beach and they were playing the game and they were tweeting it. So he was starting to get some traction in the world of social media and some validation behind the product. And last year in 2015, Amazon came by Rocket Hub's office and said, we're doing this new program called Amazon Launchpad. It's a new discovery type of platform within Amazon for really amazing products, and we want to work with Josh over at Ramp Shot. We saw his product do well, and we saw he's got some traction and some buzz in social media. Do you think we can connect and we can push his product in Amazon? So we worked with Amazon to collect some of our top projects, and Josh was one of them. And it was really interesting because literally 2 weeks ago, I get a call out of the blue from Josh. And Josh says, Brian, I just want to thank you for helping us run the crowdfunding campaign, and also for connecting us with Amazon. And I said, well, yeah, no problem. They saw you and loved you and were really interested in the product. And he said, well, because of our Amazon orders alone, I'm having to hire 2 people. Which might not sound like a huge deal in terms of scale, but hiring 2 people is hiring 2 people. And that just filled my soul with so much joy that his venture was doing well, and that crowdfunding was an effective tool for him to launch his product. He's growing in a very organic way. He's in some big retail stores and is selling his product on Amazon. But that's a great case study of somebody who knew what they were doing, why they were doing it, why they were using crowdfunding, and they were able to get off to the races pretty quickly with their venture. But, as I mentioned, crowdfunding is not a silver bullet, and it also doesn't work for everybody. So I think I should share a case study of somebody that really had to struggle with the crowdfunding model, and that's me. So I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm a pretty awesome ukulele player. And I have a band. We play all the hot spots in Brooklyn. If you're ever in New York, let me know, and I will spam you to death to come to one of our shows. So I thought I'm going to go ahead and launch, right when we launched our platform, I thought I'm going to launch my singer-songwriter band record, and I'm going to raise the money real quick. I'm just going to kind of crush it because my music is so awesome, and show the world how to crowdfund, right? So I put together a video, because videos are very important in the crowdfunding world. My video went something like this. Hey, this is Brian. This is my band. We're making a new record. It's awesome. Check it out. And I started sharing this in social media and blasting it to my friends and family. And I got some funding from my mom, from my brother, from some dude who I'd helped move a couple of weeks ago. He felt bad because I pulled my back out. He's like, here's $50. I feel bad about that. And then I got a piece of feedback. Remember what I said at the top of this? I said, funding, awareness, and feedback. The feedback went something like this. Hey, Brian, I don't know if you remember me or not, but we went to high school together, and I saw you play music in our senior talent show. Wow, you've gotten much better with your music. And I can't believe you're still doing this. You're in your 30s, you have a family, you run a company. But here's $20. Keep me posted with your story, and best of luck. And I thought, that's weird. He didn't say anything about my music at all. He obviously doesn't get it. So I start spamming and blasting out my campaign to more folks, in my network. And I got another piece of feedback, and the feedback went something like this. Hey, Brian, I don't know if you remember me or not, but I saw you play music at the Florabama. The Florabama is this little dive bar that sits between Florida and the Alabama state line. Jimmy Buffett's played there a couple of times, but other than that, it's kind of a sleepy little hole in the wall. But this person saw me play there, 15 plus years ago, and said, I'm now an accountant. I work out of Birmingham, Alabama. I'm there with my family, and I can't believe you're still making music. I can't believe that you're still doing this. You're in your 30s, you got a family. But here's $50. Keep me posted with your story, and best of luck. Now, at that point, I have two pieces of feedback that are pretty much telling me the same thing, which is, they're not that interested in my music. They were interested in my story, and actually, frankly, as a creator, as an entrepreneur, that really bothered me. Because, again, show of hands of entrepreneurs, we love our ideas. Our ideas are going to sell themselves. Just got to get them out there, right? Wrong. I had to struggle with why I do what I do and communicate that into a campaign. So I thought, why do I play to 50 drunk hipsters in Brooklyn at 1 a.m.? And the reason is because I really love music. I grew up in a musical family. My best friends and family play music, and it's a way of relating to a bigger group in a way that's organic and fun for me. What if I actually put that into my crowdfunding campaign? But that's kind of scary, telling people why I do what I do. But I'm getting feedback showing me that they're not that interested in this communication framework. I need to pivot. So I put together a new campaign, frankly, that said, hey, I've always been, it's always been a pleasure to play music with my friends, for my friends, be part of this album, and you can be one of my musical super friends. Put it out into the world, and guess what happened? I started to get funds from people deeper in my community that I was less connected with, and strangers. A ukulele blog picked up the story. Yes, we have ukulele blogs. They can be pretty big. And a UK newspaper picked it up. Actually, a music magazine picked it up out of the UK. So they picked up the story. The story was, he's a technology CEO during the day, but he still plays music at night. Said very little about the music, but it was about the story of what I was doing. So, for the entrepreneurs in the room, the next time we're framing up the campaign, or any sales initiative, or any marketing initiative, I would challenge us to not only talk about what we do, but why we do it. and have that be front and center with a lot of the communication that we're putting out there, because I could tell you firsthand that more and more folks are interested in the why from a consumer standpoint, and the more you're able to encapsulate what you do under a why umbrella, the better off you may be. Does that make sense? All right, so the first thing you have to have in a nutshell is an amazing project with excellent communication, talking about who you are, what you're doing, and why you're doing it. If you don't have that, then you're going to be dead out of the gates with crowdfunding. So you have to have that first. Second thing you have to have for crowdfunding success, networks. Networks are the bloodline of crowdfunding. And we can measure the networks in a couple simple dimensions here with width and depth. Width is a little bit easier to measure because that's how many people we kind of are connected to, how many people are on our mailing list, how many people are on our social media, how many people we can reach out and touch. But depth, that's where the secret sauce really lies. That's where social capital lives. And crowdfunding, really in its essence, is taking social capital and converting it into real capital through this process. What is social capital? It's trust, leadership, respect, the ability to get people to say yes. It's the ability to get people to say yes and follow me. It could be a little bit harder to measure, but it's very, very powerful once it's cultivated. So here's another picture of how a network looks. With these crowdfunding campaigns, it's really important to bring your own heat. I like to say nobody likes to be the first one dancing on the dance floor in middle school. It's true. Same is true with your crowdfunding campaign. Nobody wants to be the first one funding it if they don't really know who you are and what you're doing. The fact that I had my mom and brother and some other folks on my campaign before it went out to a broader audience was actually really important because, again, having your first funders is social proof that you're on to something and that you're worthy of trust, respect, and capital. It's actually very much true in the offline world too, right? So if you're out pitching angels or VCs, a lot of the first questions are going to be around who else is on this deal. And oftentimes the first dominoes to fall are the hardest ones to get. Same is true with crowdfunding. So you have, the project leader, the entrepreneur is kind of at the top. You have the first degree network and the second degree network. Crowdfunding really enables your network to become your sales force. And they can be a part of this project not only by funding it, but also through sharing it, which is where the model gets really, really powerful. Here's a shoe company, Spira, out of El Paso, Texas. Andy was the founder of the company, and he had a spring-powered sneaker, and he had a really interesting story too. He used to be a lawyer, and then he started a shoe company after 17 years of practicing law because as he was getting older, he found that after his long runs, he was getting some aches and pains, and he thought, why don't I build a sneaker that helps with the shocks to the body, and maybe better for you, maybe beneficial for your health after long runs or walks. So he crowdfunded on Rocket Hub. He raised a little over 40 grand. And it was really interesting because he had a core base of followers already, but those followers became his evangelists and said, hey, check out this campaign, take a look at what Andy's doing, here's a chance to get a good deal on these amazing sneakers. And from that momentum, I get a call from the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal reaches out saying, hey, Brian, I see this campaign on Rocket Hub, the spring-powered shoe guy. Can we do a story? We want to do a story on small, medium enterprises using crowdfunding to make things happen. Can we do a piece with you and Andy? And I said, absolutely. So from there, now Andy's in the Wall Street Journal, and then from the Wall Street Journal, he gets a call from somebody at Foot Locker, which is a major chain in the US. They were launching a boutique running store called Run by Foot Locker, and they had 15 shops in strategically placed locations across the US, and they wanted to run his shoe in the store. So remember what I said, this is not just a funding event, it's an awareness and feedback event. If you were to talk to Andy now, he would say the biggest piece of this campaign was actually getting the broader awareness and distribution for his product. But Andy's story doesn't end there. We'll talk a little bit more about what he did later on. But this is all about networks and engaging the networks to get behind you as an entrepreneur and get excited about who you are, what you're doing, why you're doing it, and sharing it with other people. Without social proof, without social capital, this will be very difficult. So building a community that's attached to your product, that's attached to your venture is also very, very important. Just to show you the power of social proof, I walk with my daughter and son and wife to school. We drop them off at school, and then she goes to work in Washington Heights, and we'll have the food trucks sitting out in the neighborhood in the morning selling different foods for breakfast. And social proof is a very powerful thing because two food trucks can be operating, one across the street from the other. One's got a line around the block. The other one has no line. Everybody runs to which food truck? The one with the line. Why? Must be good. Interesting. So, as a crowdfunder, you can leverage this momentum of social proof because nothing attracts a crowd like a crowd. So the more you can bring your own network to the campaign, the more powerful your campaign will be. Does that make sense? All right, so that's the second thing, which is networks. Third thing, and again, this is more relevant in the rewards good space, but also can be very relevant in the equity space too, in terms of what you serve up in exchange for the hard-earned funds. Successful goods or rewards do a few things. They sell the journey. You have different levels. What's really neat about crowdfunding is people can pick where they want to play in this. Are they a $10 person? Are they a $1,000 person? Are they somewhere in between? They can pick based on their financial means and level of excitement. You can have different levels. Fun exchange. Inviting people to be part of the campaign. This is really about relationships, just as much as it is about funding. We'll take a look at one of my early mentors, Ariel, who's based out of Brooklyn, and she runs a social media agency. And she used crowdfunding to launch her book and a new online class that she was launching around social media. And she raised over $60,000 to do that. And she had some fun things to offer in exchange for the monies. $20 got you a digital book. $50 got you a signed copy of the book plus an enrollment in the digital course, right? So now we're moving from digital goods into real tangible things. She had other levels up to $5,000, and $5,000 got you a VIP session with her where you can kind of map out your whole social media strategy for the next year or two. And I learned a lot from running my own crowdfunding campaign on the importance of how you frame, from a communication standpoint, how you frame these goods or rewards. So for example, if you funded my campaign and put $10 in, you got a CD. For $20, you got a CD signed by the band, delivered to your doorstep with love, and your own custom haiku poem. Guess which one outsold the other 4-1? The second one. Why? It's the same product virtually at double the price. It was more interesting. I would argue it changed their emotional state. Delivered to your doorstep with love, with your own custom haiku poem. We did write a lot of poems, but I would argue that they thought that that was more interesting from an emotional perspective than an actual tangible good perspective. For $50, we would Sergeant Pepper you, which means we would put your face on the cover of the album, and as a result, we have all these pretty faces on the cover of the album. For $100, I would give you an ukulele lesson. For $250, I would take you surfing in Long Island. And I had a stranger do that. Someone I had never met said, I will pay $250 to go surfing with you in Long Island. We're friends now. For $600, I would write and record your own acoustic song. And I had 3 people do that. For $1,000, you could come to the recording studio and watch the magic happen. $1,000. Nobody took that one. $5,000, you could be the star of our music video made by a superstar director. Nobody took that one either. But I still raised the $6,000 or whatever it was to make an album that I'm very proud of and that I used my community to fund. And I'll tell you something, as a successful crowdfunder, walking into the studio with the 100 people that had already supported me gave me an extra sense of oomph, an extra sense of urgency and attention to detail that maybe I wouldn't have had if I hadn't already had an audience waiting for delivery of something really exceptional. So those are the 3 things that are needed for this, right? They're the project, be exceptional and communicate in ways that are emotionally engaging. The network, engage the network, bring your community first, leverage your social capital, and encourage them to fund and share. And then 3, having goods, rewards, perks, products, or potentially an investment that is attractive to your audience. Does that make sense? All right, so this is virtually the same for all of the rewards-based platforms. You have a checklist of things that you need, title of a campaign. I would suggest something dynamic and interesting and uplifting, not please fund me, help, help, help. That's probably not a good title. Financial goals should be reasonable based on kind of where you are with your venture. So if you're earlier on and no one's heard of you and you don't have much of a track record, raising $1 million through crowdfunding is probably a bit unrealistic. However, if you're earlier on and you need 5, 10, 20, 30 grand to build out your prototype further and provide some value to your audience or fans, maybe that does make sense. Have a financial goal that makes sense based on where you are. Time frame, again, 30 to 45 days makes sense for most of these. Videos should be mandatory in the world of crowdfunding. I always tell folks that authenticity trumps slickness when it comes to videos, which means you don't have to spend a lot of money on the video. Just make sure it's authentic, it's credible, it's congruent with your other messaging online. Ariel, who raised $60,000 in 3 weeks over the Christmas holiday or over the winter holiday, I told her not to launch at that time because it's the worst time ever to launch, but she kind of just did it anyway, and she was very successful. She was just talking into her phone, her iPhone. And it was well lit, it was well recorded, but she raised over 60 grand. So you don't have to be very dynamic necessarily with the videos, they just need to be credible. Images should be exceptional. Those are what are going to attract the press, the blogs. Your imagery should be really, really, really good. Written description should match what your video content is. So some people are going to read and not watch the video. Some people are not going to read and just watch the video. Some people are just going to scan the body of the text and look for things to pull out. So think of the video and the written description as kind of a belt and suspenders approach to your communication. And of course, we know the importance of having the rewards. And here's kind of the game plan after the campaign is out and up and running. So you have it up, you have it out, take a deep breath to the entrepreneurs in the room that raised their hands earlier, and just commit to the process, and I guarantee you will learn some things. Build those first followers, get them involved early on. You can prime the pump even before you launch. Have them lined up, ready to go, your first followers to jump in. And again, show the world that your project is legit, your campaign is legit. Build dialogue with them. I recommend something that's very simple and just thanking people and publicly thanking them in social media, tagging them, thanking them. Number one, it's a good karma thing to do. And number two, people start to see it organically, your campaign, attached with success. They see people coming in, people funding it, people get excited about it. Spiral out, tell the story. Tell different pieces of your story over that 30 to 45 days. Be very strategic in your communication. It should not be, hey, come fund me, come check me out. Remember, we learned that from my case study, that doesn't work, but maybe you pull them in with a neat reward that you're offering, or a neat piece of the story of why you came up with the product. Be creative in your communication to pull people in. Meet the press. The press is often very interested in crowdfunding. Consistently very interested in crowdfunding, especially ones that are doing well. So engage press early on and get them excited about what you're doing. And then finish strong. By finish strong, I mean if you're going to do some harder sale tactics, do it toward the end of the campaign, which means ramping up your momentum, ramping up your sell, and ramping up your the numbers of times that you're touching points with your fans, the number of outbound communication that's happening. And the result could be not only the money, but the awareness and just a general sense of momentum. A general sense of momentum. Kind of like the call I got from Josh B. on the Amazon piece. Fun story was, I play in a band, I mentioned that before. My guitar player, after my successful record, he goes, "Brian, do you think I could make this eclectic electric folk album on Rocket Hub and raise $3,500 to do it?" And I said, "Probably. It seems like a reasonable thing to do." So he does that. He raises $3,500, and I get a call from him. And he said, "Brian, you're not going to believe this." This is a few years ago, before music icon Lou Reed passed away. He said, "I got a call from Lou Reed's manager, and Lou is looking for a new guitar player. And they came across my Rocket Hub campaign, and they asked me to come audition for Lou Reed." And I thought, wow, that's pretty exceptional. And he said, "Yeah, that's pretty cool. I'll let you know how it goes." And he hangs up and says thanks for helping him with his campaign, and hangs up. I get a call the next day. "Brian, I've got some bad news and I've got some good news. The bad news is that for our next gig at 1 a.m. down in Brooklyn, where we're hoping to play for 50 people, I'm not going to be there because I'm going to be on tour with Lou Reed," which was Lou's final tour across Europe, playing to 10,000 people a night. And that's what he spent his summer doing. And then he went on tour with Diana Krall, and he's played with all these big rock stars. He barely returns my calls anymore. He raised $3,500, but it changed his entire career. So really, we don't look at this as just a funding event. It really is an awareness and momentum event. As I mentioned with A&E, they got involved with crowdfunding pretty early on as visionaries. They saw what we were doing and were really threw a lot of resources behind our partnership. And it's a funny story because I remember I got that call from A&E, and within 2 days I was down in their offices in Midtown East. And the meeting went really well, obviously. And so I get called back the following week for another meeting, and there's more people, more executives in the boardroom, and that meeting went really well. And then finally I got called back for another meeting, and it's full of all the executives. And they're talking about what they want to do with Rocket Hub and kind of how it fits with some of their corporate strategies. And Libby, who you'll see a clip of in this next teaser for the documentary, said, "I really think we should get involved with Rocket Hub right now, because it wouldn't surprise me if they're talking to some of our competitors in the media space." And without even really thinking, I said, "Yeah, Libby, you're right. We've been talking to Network X, Network Y, and Network Z." And when I dropped Network Z, the whole state of the boardroom changed. And I could tell that I did something either really good or really bad. So Libby stands up and she goes, "Oh yeah? Well, in your meetings with Network Z, did they do this?" She pulls up Rocket Hub, she pulls out the A&E American Express, and she buys everybody on her floor the spring-powered sneakers. She bought 50 pairs of spring-powered sneakers. So the next meeting we had, everyone was running around in their spring-powered sneakers saying, "This is so cool." And they said, "What could we do for a flagship campaign to kind of, launch our partnership?" And they were thinking, what could we do? And they were, bouncing around their spring-powered sneakers. And I'll share more about that story in a second, but I'll go ahead and play the 2-minute teaser from our documentary that came out last year.
Up for Project Startup, connecting aspiring entrepreneurs with an online community looking to support something new.
The Rocket Hub is the world's crowdfunding machine, as we like to call it. It's a place where anybody with an idea can come and leverage the crowd to fund their idea.
What Andy and Rocket Hub bring together is this powerful dynamic to really push these companies to that next level.
Project Startup is about new ways of taking your ideas and turning them into businesses that work, not just on paper, but in real life. So when you combine the energy of Duck Dynasty and all that entrepreneurial get up and go with people like Barry on Storage Wars and our show Shipping Wars, Project Startup is going to help our audience do the same thing. We have tips on how to begin your search for funding and how to start a business plan. We're bringing our celebrity talent online to give you tips about how they got started. And it's going to help people understand how to bring their ideas to the marketplace. It's going to link funds to the people who need funds, but not before they're ready to go out.
Our view is that in 5 to 10 years, 95% of seed funding is going to come from the crowd. This is a whole new wave. It's a whole new way of doing things. And together, we create this very powerful new mechanism for taking entrepreneurs to the next level.
Project Startup, where big ideas become real-life success stories.
Up and around the boardroom looking for an idea, someone said, well, why don't we integrate Andy's sneakers with the #1 show they had at the time and do a big campaign around it. And as a result, Andy ended up launching another campaign that went up over 10x. So he raised, with the help, some promotional support from A&E Networks, about $500,000, which was a 10x up from his campaign about 6 to 8 months prior. So whenever you're doing, when an entrepreneur can capture involvement from a major corporation, whether it's Amazon or A&E, the needle gets moved pretty quickly. And crowdfunding is now kind of an incubation grounds of sorts for some of these bigger companies to get involved and to become a catalyst for growth, which is really exciting. And I'll leave our conversation with kind of what I think of as the new like button, which is crowdfunding. I mean, we like stuff a lot in social media, we vote on things, but how often do we ever really remember them? We don't. But when you fund something, do you remember it? Absolutely. Because it hits us in the most sensitive part of our body, which is our wallet. Thank you all.
Thank you, Brian. Before continuing with our next speaker, a kind reminder to please give us your feedback, fill out the evaluation forms, and leave them on the desks in front of you. Pangradios Vanezis is a principal as well as enterprise and startups team leader at KPMG Cyprus. He's very influential in the growing entrepreneurship and startup ecosystem in Cyprus, and he's a speaker, host, and moderator in many of the local events. The KPMG Enterprise and Startups team of KPMG Cyprus is established to facilitate entrepreneurial change in Cyprus and help entrepreneurs in their journey to turn their ideas into successful businesses. He's mentoring teams, and he's also involved in developing their business model, go-to-market approach, and finding investors. Additionally, Pangradios is part of the crowdfunding initiative in Cyprus, and he's involved in the legislation drafting. The title of Mr. Vanezis' presentation is Crowdfunding, Paving New Ways in Cyprus.
Hello. It's on. Hello, everyone. Hi. Hi. So I just realized that I shouldn't leave my presentation at the end just after Brian's. So, I have to say a big thanks for the turnout. It has been an amazing day, and don't worry, I won't bore you anymore. I'll just be very quick. I must say I'm humbled by the quality of the speakers. Everyone was amazing, and I must say that it has truly been a very constructive day, at least to us, hopefully to you as well. Well, my presentation today will evolve essentially about pushing boundaries in Cyprus. we like to beat ourselves a lot and, self-punish on the number of errors that we make. But essentially, what I would like to elevate in the next 10 minutes, it's that we have to be pushing boundaries. And I think today, this is exactly what we are doing. I shall be, speaking about the current ecosystem and a roadmap for Cyprus to implement crowdfunding. The first question that popped into my mind is what was I doing 3 years ago? And yes, I wasn't talking about entrepreneurship, and I was talking about agribusiness, to be honest. But yes, I wasn't talking about entrepreneurship. And I have to thank the guys, and Michael is here representing them from the Cypriot Enterprise Link, that essentially this was actually blank 3 years ago, and today is full of initiatives and full of corporates. So it's actually fill up the slide, so great. So yes, it's full of initiatives. So we are proud. We're having an incubation now in Cyprus, so an idea. So there is a number of different initiatives that help promote entrepreneurship and create ideas that can potentially become successful businesses. And now we've got crowdfunding, and there is a number of initiatives, and there is a number of platforms that are ready to go about and facilitating entrepreneurial change. And exactly this is what we want in KPMG. So we have Cheese and Wise Night. No, I'm just kidding. It's awareness sessions, KPMG Enterprise Tuesdays, first Tuesday of every month. We talk about entrepreneurship and give the platforms to new entrepreneurs to help promote their selves, create awareness, as Brian said, and obviously get going and create networking. We have now entrepreneurship in the Army. So yes, Ilan, we have it in Cyprus as well. Not as exciting as it is in Israel, but yes, through our collaboration with Open University and SIDA, we did a very, very powerful 8-session awareness on entrepreneurship in the Army with excellent results, I must admit. We've got Startup Europe Week, so we are on the map there as well, and Startup Weekends. We attracting more than 1,600 people coming to share their ideas and trying to create their businesses. So essentially, yes, we are thinking, or we are saying that we have an ecosystem. So when I was speaking with the other collaborators or entrepreneurial action that is going on, I'm asking, okay, what's our campus? Where are we going? Do we have a vertical? Are we in fintech? This is a very buzzword, as Ilan has explained. And unfortunately not. Most of the ideas that are being sprung out from Cyprus are all over the place. We don't know where we're going. We don't have a specific campus in mind. There are ideas, and there are people who want to get their ideas forward, but not necessarily in the right way or in the right spectrum or in the right vertical. So we are in a bit of a predicament, let's say. So there are a number of key KPIs or success factors. Unfortunately, private funding, it's limited. We've got Cyban, the first Cyprus Business Angels Network with 46, but investment in projects is very slow. They're saying that the deal flow is slow, okay? Early stage funding or late stage funding is also very, very slow. And essentially, I can go on and say that, obviously, we should be doing more. We've had some very positive issues. We've got like labor costs, which are theoretically competitive versus the competition. We have a very big number of graduates. Well, that can be both a positive and a negative. Because currently absorbed by non-entrepreneurial action. And in general, we have some pros and cons that we should be looking into it as a nation. Now, Okay, so we have an ecosystem. There are actually people among us here today who are interested in promoting and getting their projects and their ideas funded or becoming businesses. We are into not also innovation, but to the creation of successful and SMEs. So is crowdfunding a solution for Cyprus? Well, I think every one of the speakers gave a very good case of the pros and cons of crowdfunding. I would say that it will definitely push the boundaries. And this is one of the reasons on the onset that we should try and elaborate and try to find a solution quickly. We are not renowned for the speed with which we do things in Cyprus, but we are effective. Okay, what are the problems? The latest quarter results from the banks show that the loans have been picking up, but not in the right businesses. Essentially now funding is still collateral based, and there is very little importance on the feasibility studies and the business plans. So we have a small number of investors. There are investors who are looking for projects, but there are projects that they can be investing with good returns. So they will not be so much inclined to invest in less or let's say more risky projects. EU funds are good when they come, but they have a huge administrative burden, and in general, their investment amounts are relatively small. Now, and this is where it comes. We have a new generation, and a new generation means new needs. We were discussing offline with the speakers yesterday, and I think one of the key issues that we need to be bringing on is that the new generation is not trusting people, is trusting their iPhones and their phablets or tablets or whatever they call now. So they're trusting their phablets more than they are trusting people. They are trusting technology, and we've got the blockchain coming in probably to rock the fintech world and whatever. And this is the outlook. And this is why we should be bringing the new technology now. And essentially, what we aim is to make the impossible possible, and this is very topical because of Muhammad Ali's departure and how impossible is nothing. But yes, Cyprus lags behind R&D. We at the university, this crowdfunding, we believe, will be a platform for university ideas to become a reality. We have some very good technology ideas that can be pushed forward, products, and I mean, I got inspired by one of the participants here that they want to do a film in Cyprus, and why not? I mean, Malta is doing a great job in their filming industry, and they're attracting Hollywood blockbusters coming in Malta. So why not Cyprus, which is actually, we were actually discussing, correct Sasha, that for example in the Fast and the Furious, the Troodos scene it's actually better than the set that it was filmed on. Or am I too optimistic? Pretty good, okay, thank you. Now, and of course, impact investment. Investment has to do with socially changing, or socially having an impact which changes the quality of life for us in the community. Key property projects and of course donations, which has very well said by Mrs. Katselli. So what happens with legislation and regulation? I think both Mrs. Kalogiru and Andreas from the Ministry of Finance were apt in explaining that the EU says, okay, it's on our radar, but we are not going to be doing anything because we have a lot of things going on in Brussels, and we have a lot of things that we are discussing in Brussels. Unfortunately, not so many, but yes, we are looking at it, but we are not coming up with the legislation any soon. So we are led up to the nationwide policies, and we are thinking that yes, there is a change coming. We should be proactive and get the regulation coming in. Why? because we as Cypriots thrive better when there is regulation rather than in the absence of regulation. So I'm sure that you can all think of a couple of examples in your mind. It's not the platform here to elaborate. So yes, the legislation, should we utilize existing legislation? I certainly think so. And we are proposing a couple of a framework whereabout we can discuss how we can get things going. And of course, we need monitoring. It's not unfortunate to say, this is a global thing and it's a European thing. The more when you put regulations, you need to be able to monitor them effectively. Now, to be honest, I don't have anything more to add. I try to be as concise as possible, and I will leave it all to the panel. And I will leave you off with a very powerful video that has been created by a new female entrepreneur that we are collaborating on with KPMG Enterprise Hub, and essentially is the essence of what we are delivering here today. Pushing boundaries and making things become possible, and forgetting about the things that we cannot do and focusing on the things that we can do. So this is from BrainCube and Xeni, who is actually in the floor today. So thank you very much, Xeni. So yes, hope you like it, guys, and hopefully I can make it start. No, okay. Okay, I think it's a very powerful video. Thank you very much, Xeni. Yes. So this wraps up my presentation. Thank you very much. You were very patient with us, and we're gonna open the floor for the panel. So if everyone can join me here. Sarah, she's a star. I must say I'm amazed with Sarah. Ilan, okay, he's a crowd pleaser. I mean, I got like 5 messages saying that Ilan is great. So. Not a problem at all. Not a problem. Yes, Andreas, you were a star as well. And last but not least, Brian and Irene. So yes, the floor is open. I mean, thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much for making the headway. Yes. If you can just state your name and your organization, that would be excellent.
Peter Tangalos, Barclays Bank. Firstly, thank you to all the presenters. It was, I think, very informative for all that were here today. I heard a lot today around the community and tapping into the community as part of this process. And I was just wondering, above all else, how do you protect that community? So how do you protect it from rogue elements in terms of this? This is an industry in its infancy, so there's obviously a lot of positives that we've talked about today, but how do you go about protecting the people that you're essentially trying to attract as part of the development of the industry?
Okay. Thank you very much. I think this is I think it can go out to Sarah, Ilan, and Brian because of their background. Okay, so Sarah, if you ladies first. Okay. You can take that.
Thank you. Okay, so I think I go back to what I said earlier in my presentation. In the UK, what happened was that a lot of the crowdfunders got together and formed an association, and there's actually 2 associations within the UK, and they lobbied Parliament and they lobbied the regulator, and they formed a body together to try and get sensible regulation that would work in an environment where you're a startup, but also in a way that protects the investor. At the end of the day, it's the retail investor that everyone's worried about, and also the business to make sure, or the actual borrower or person that's taking on equity, are they doing it for the right reasons? Can they actually afford this? And that's what's going to be really important at the end of the day. So I think it's about collaboration with your regulator. I think it's working with them, it's working together as a team, because peer pressure does work. And if you can, stimulate the team to work together to have, sensible regulation that works in an environment to enable the market to grow, but also stops that rogue player go and do something that's dodgy, then I think that's the way forward on that. Don't know if you've got perspectives as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would just mention that, look, I was just literally just on the phone with somebody talking about different types and different crowdfunding platforms, and what he said is something like, there's a cheap and easy way to just get a lot of volume and a lot of deals and all that, and then there's the right way to do it. And I think that, we've taken an approach which is, we want to be encouraging that crowd. I know I talked a lot about that. And we want to be encouraging active investors as well as entrepreneurs who come to us and are passionate about what they're doing. But at the end of the day, it's about diligence and sort of KYC on both sides, right? I mean, so our platform, you can go to the front page of the website, but if you want to, legitimately register on our website and be involved, we're going to know who that person is, and we're obligated to do some background checks, and we do that. And we also have the ability to, kick people off the platform. I mean, it's technology. It's not complicated. And then in terms of the companies coming to us, as Sarah said, we diligence all of our companies very deeply and very, very thoroughly. And I think it's also very important about, to have an alignment of interests, right? So for example, in our case, and not all platforms are like this, but in our case, we are investing not only our name and our credibility in every deal we do, but we're investing our own money in every deal we do. So if one of our investors, that retail investor that we are all very worried about, comes and sees an investment opportunity on our platform, we are investing our own money. And they are investing on the exact same terms as we are. So if there's something dodgy or fraudulent, we're in the same boat. And that's the way we take the risk, but hopefully we've mitigated the risk as well.
Those are great points. The question was about protecting the integrity of a community, and fantastic points. I mean, I look at building the audience for Rocket Hub a lot like building the audience for a band, and that was adding value to the audience consistently, and trying to turn that audience into raving fans of our brand and kind of what we represented. A lot of that is through a lot of communication, a lot of education. A key piece of our secret sauce as a brand was the educational piece, which y'all had a taste of today through my lecture. But we had is still active now. The Success School on Rocket Hub really is a soup to nuts kind of educational hub where folks can learn about how to use crowdfunding effectively and responsibly. We got involved with multiple stakeholders at the corporate level and the governmental level. We shared our data with the SEC, wrote multiple white papers on how we think equity crowdfunding should be implemented in a way that is fair for all the stakeholders. So it's about having that, building your audience, knowing kind of what you represent, but also getting involvement from other stakeholders and sharing that information.
Great. Next question. Christos, I will keep the ladies first.
Hi, this is Elena Mantrelli from Honeys. So I'm a lawyer here, so I think I have a question for Sarah. In terms of structuring, how do you typically see crowdfunding platforms being set up? So are they companies? Are they limited partnerships? What's the typical structure you see? And building on that, do you see the use of segregated portfolio companies? And if not, is there a reason why?
Okay, so in the UK, they've generally been set up as effectively a company owned by the founders of those companies, and then when they've gone into fundraising rounds, then they've diluted their shareholding to bring additional investors on board. So it's generally been through a limited company, but that's not to say there probably isn't. There aren't other models out there. What was your second question? I didn't quite catch that.
Basically, I was asking if have you seen any use of segregated portfolio companies, so sort of like a fund with underlying separate sub-funds?
The most I've seen of that is in terms of the secondary market, and that's on. So what's been happening in the UK again is that. And it isn't on every platform, but some of the platforms have a secondary market. So that allows the investor to pass on their loan to a secondary investor. So there is effectively a second pool of funds. The other things I've seen, which I don't think necessarily are the question you're asking, are that there has been funds that have been listed on the London Stock Exchange to invest into some of these platforms. I've also seen the rise of aggregators, so they haven't actually necessarily got much traction as yet, but I think there might be a wave that's coming on. So that's a place where, say, an SME could go onto a platform and find all sorts of different crowdfunding options that might fit their purpose. So there's a few different models that I've seen. I don't know if anybody else has seen anything in their geographies. No? Yeah? Okay.
Okay. We've got 1, 2. Christos, you are up next. Just a brief comment. If you have any question, unfortunately, it's another issue that we have as an island. The connection flights are poor. Where Elon has to leave from Hilton Park in 30 minutes, so if you want to, in 25 minutes. So if you want to address any questions pertaining to Elon, please do so. So he has
You have 25 minutes. I mean,
Okay, my question will be very, very fast. Thank you, Pancratios, Mr. Pancratios, Mr. Vanessis, for your invitation. Great event. I would like to ask, nobody was talking about the cost of this crowdfunding. So, me as a company, I'm going to subscribe to Mr. Brian or Andreas or Elan or another one. What I have to pay, what are the charges, what are the fees? Thank you.
Very good question. I can take it from the reward space or the donation space. In the U.S., it's a commission-based model. Most of the platforms are free to launch, and they make money only if you have a successful raise. The fees can range anywhere from 4 to 12%, depending on a variety of factors, whether you hit your goal or not, because sometimes some platforms will charge a higher fee if you raise funds but don't hit your goal. But generally speaking, it's at the end of the campaign. It can range from 4 to 12%, and that's pretty much the market from the U.S. perspective on the perks or rewards-based space.
Yeah, so in the equity crowdfunding model, there are two different models, but the one that we operate under is we don't take anything from the company. We're investing in companies. We're not interested in taking money from them. They're going to need all the money they can get to build a great company. So we're investing, and we take management fees from our investors, just like any other asset manager would, like any venture capital fund or anybody else. So if we select a company that we want to invest in, and our investors want to join us, our investors are paying us management fees, and the company pays us nothing other than some legal costs that would be standard in any transaction where a company raises equity. There are some other platforms that do it a little differently, where they take a commission for raising money. They're sort of more acting as a broker or a banker, and then they'll go out and raise money for a company, and they'll take a percentage of what's raised as a commission. But that's not a model that we operate under. It's not a model that I like that much. I think it causes a bit of a potential conflict of interests. And our view is we want to be as aligned in terms of interests with our investors as well as with our companies that we're investing in as possible.
I think if we want to see in a research-based methodology what platforms have been doing around the world, they used to have different commission rates for flexible or fixed funding. So if you wanted to raise, for example, 20,000 euros, you would have to pay a commission rate if you managed to raise those 20,000 euros, which would be a fixed funding model. Then if you chose to have a flexible funding model, which means that you would want to have as much money as you could raise of the 20,000, then the commission rate would be different. But I think now the commission is standard for either flexible or fixed funding. So it really depends on the platform and on the type of crowdfunding that you're after, if it's equity lending or donations based.
There's just one other thing that I should just point out. It is quite niche to the UK, which is when you're lending on some platforms, some of them in the UK have built up what they call a provident fund, which is effectively a provision fund for if the loan goes bad, they'll pay out of that that provision fund first. So you will pay a small fee that goes into it. Now, in the UK at the moment, it's a very benign interest rate environment that I mentioned before. It's only 0.5% Bank of England rate. So the question mark here is what will happen when interest rates rise, because clearly there will be an increase in default rates. They're very, very low at the moment in the UK, and therefore how quickly will that provident fund be used up, and would that lead to an increase in fees? So a few question marks, but hopefully that addresses your question.
Very good point.
Just the last point, maybe for lending. Interest rates or the commission you have to pay is typically you have as an investor you pay a setup fee That is also quite typically, at least for our platforms. And in terms of rates or commission you have to pay is around 6 to 12%. So it really depends on your rating, on the type of the business you're in. But I just want to add to the previous question. I think one thing which is important is transparency on platforms. So exactly this question, so how much does it cost? Where can I find this information? That is an asset a platform should have, and it becomes more and more important. The transparency in terms of costs and how does it run. For example, particularly for equity or for lending, how is the rating done? Who's behind the platform? So these kind of things. So transparency, I think it's very important, becomes even more important for platforms.
Hi, my name is Kyriagos. I'm an IT business consultant. Basically, I have a question for Brian. Brian, when you started building the platform, have you used a bespoke custom solution for the platform, or did you go using a tool such as WordPress or Joomla, or any other tool?
So, as I mentioned, I was kind of an accidental entrepreneur. I was in graduate school, coming off of a career in media, and I thought, why not build a website? That sounds like something fun and interesting to do. And a friend of mine built websites, so I called him and I said, hey, Phil, what would it take to build this website? And he built it ground up. He became kind of our launching CTO, our chief engineer. But the reality is I just had somebody else kind of build what we thought would work. So it was all proprietary, custom built for what we needed it to do. So now there are plug and play modules for crowdfunding, and there's a lot of really good things in the market. But that didn't exist 5 or 6 years ago, so we built all of our stuff from scratch.
Okay, and also, which categories had the most interest in the platform?
Well, I can't speak on from a market perspective. I think we probably follow the market, but the bread and butter of our business was traditionally the arts, very, very broadly categorized. Dance, theater, film, music. It became pretty much a staple of our site. That could be because we had partnerships with Fractured Atlas, which is a major art organization. We had partnerships with New York, different New York arts organizations that would feed us artists. But the first couple of years of our platform was mostly arts. Then we started to do more in the world of science and research. And then the last wing, which was probably powered mostly from our A&E partnership, was entrepreneurship and small business. So for us, it wasn't necessarily just kind of what the market was doing. It was what was our feeder giving us, right? So what were our partnerships or our media touch points, kind of what projects were they feeding us? But those were our general buckets, were the arts, the science, entrepreneurship, and then we had kind of this other bucket, which was just kind of social things. But I hope that answers your question. I don't know if anyone else has any more granular information on what the categories are like. But.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks.
Christos, we come to you.
If you were engaged to advise Cyprus on how we can become a crowdfunding hub, and by saying crowdfunding hub, I don't mean just concentrate only in the local market, which is quite small. What would you suggest? One or two things, one or two ingredients that we should be adopting to help the country become a hub? And as you know, Cyprus is in the middle of Middle East, Europe, Africa. It's well positioned to become a hub. What are your views on that, based on your experiences? And maybe Sarah can give us some insights coming from London, which is the biggest, I would say, crowdfunding hub in Europe at the moment.
Yeah, I think where I'd start is you've got to be trusted, and when you're an industry that's new, you know, it's new to everybody, so you need to play a straight bat, and you need to make sure that you work within good guidelines, and you know, I said it earlier, but you don't drop your standards, and you make sure you do, as you say on the tin, you are transparent, and you don't create any sort of worries about dishonesty. So I think that's why it's really important that you work with your regulator, you work with the local government, you collaborate, you raise awareness within the local market so that people understand what's going on, and then you need to look at how you can extend that outside into other countries. But I think you need to get it right here first, and then think about how you expand. That would be my soundbite.
Yeah, I think it's always important to look at where your strengths are and what the competitive differentiators could be. So, I mean, you know, one of the things we even talked about last night, of course, is, you know, thinking about Cyprus as an offshore, you know, jurisdiction, something that's not my expertise, and I'll leave it to the KPMG team to talk about that. But I mean, for example, the model that we use is, you know, every single investment we make actually has an offshore vehicle, an offshore special purpose vehicle. We don't happen to domicile those in Cyprus right now. That's a longer conversation, but I think it's actually an issue of awareness and marketing. For example, for people like myself who have more of a North American background, when we think about, even though I live 40 minutes away from here now, we think about offshore, we think about BVI or Cayman, just the way it is. So, but I think that's one example. There's, you know, there are tax benefits to Cyprus. I think there are other things to think about, some that I probably don't even know, in terms of why you could attract global, or let's say European-focused crowdfunding platforms to be here, to be domiciled here from a legal or a tax perspective, even if their core business is somewhere else. And again, you need to think those things through, but I think it's about thinking through the competitive advantages that one has here, rather than trying to be something, you know, somewhere else, if you see what I mean.
Excellent, Ilan. Totally agree.
Just want to, something that we discussed many times before, and I think that, and this goes out to any government representatives that are in the room today, that basically what we have to think about when we think about Cyprus as a crowdfunding hub is that our focus shouldn't only be on creating platforms, but on creating a side economy and a services industry that has been diversified from the strict legal and auditing service provision that we have known so far. This means that Cyprus can be used for crowdfunding as a service, either through corporate vehicles, either for financial due diligence of companies, either for attracting investment from third countries into Europe. So it's creating a hub, creating awareness, and then actually trying to see how we can regulate platforms, which is a very important aspect nevertheless. Thanks.
And I'll bring kind of the community lens perspective again. Brad Feld has got a really great book. He's a fairly famous kind of angel investor, VC out of the States, called Startup Communities. And he talks about leaders and feeders. And leaders of an entrepreneurial movement are usually the entrepreneurs themselves. And that's fostered through community building. So finding the right individuals and building the right community that's both here on Cyprus and beyond to kind of get alignment on what kind of ventures they want to launch and what they want to do and why. And then looking at what unique resources that you have here and what, you know, unique competitive advantages. I have a hunch that there are several, but I think it also, you have to get the right people involved, right? The right community built, and that's going to take some entrepreneurial, kind of innovative minds, kind of working collectively.
Great. Any other questions? Yes, another one here. Sorry. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Nicholas Yanidis. I represent here today an NGO, Celt for Cyprus. And since we are an NGO and we are mostly directed towards reward-based crowdfunding, I would like to ask which are the credentials to price a reward, to put a price on a reward. Because there are the fees in some of the platforms and also other things. Thank you.
So when you're doing any kind of pre-sales campaign, whether you're an NGO, a band, a straight company, the numbers have to make sense, right? So you need to factor in what the cost of manufacturing, what the cost of shipping, all these things out, and make sure you're clearing a healthy enough profit on them. What I've seen a lot of NGOs, or similarly, I've seen a lot of scientists. We had a wave of scientists use our platform a couple of years ago, and they kind of came at us with a similar question, which is, well, we don't really produce traditional stuff. What could we do to get people excited about fundraising with us? And I would encourage you to look at some things that may not cost a lot of money, but are impactful for your funders. So, for example, maybe you host a dinner and do a slideshow of, one of your trips or some initiative that you've worked on. Inviting people to actually be part of what you're doing. Invite them to, again, some kind of event, or maybe if you're going to do some work abroad, build some kind of media-rich blog that they can have access to, and that's unique to them. They get content that they can't get elsewhere. Getting bogged down with a lot of products and shipping and manufacturing is probably going to be, if it's outside your core operations, it's going to be cumbersome and potentially not worth it. So look at things that you're already doing and try to get your crowd involved with them, whether it's offline or online. But I would use some experiential things and maybe some content things to get them excited about funding, as opposed to products.
And I think the best way to do this is through research. You have to go online and see what other people have given as rewards in relation to similar projects that you want to crowdfund, and then customize those rewards to suit your own personal objective. So I think research is very important when you're starting out, try to figure out the hierarchy of rewards and how you want to price them.
I'm Michalis Loizidis from KPMG. The question I think was partly answered, but my question was, who sets the terms of the funding arrangement that is going to be secured through the crowdfunding platform? Is it the platform, or is it the people seeking the funding or providing the funding? That would go for initial investment, of course, and also for a secondary market.
So, so at least if we're talking about equity crowdfunding, again, the way we think about it is the terms are completely set in a negotiation between ourselves and the company we're funding, if that was what your question was. In other words, it's,
is it the job of the platform or the people managing the platform to discuss the terms, or is it the people who seek the investment? They say, okay, I have this request for $1 million, and I'll pay this with a return of X%, which is what they define, or is it something that the platform would discuss and agree, so that when it reaches the public, it's a complete product?
it's a complete, at least in equity crowdfunding, it's a complete negotiation. I mean, somebody who comes to us with a company and they want to sell equity in their business, like any other time they're going to raise equity from any other institution or venture capital or angel investor, they can come and say, we want to raise $1 million and we want to sell 10% of their company. That's all well and good, but we as the investors have to agree to that. So I might say, no, you're going to raise $1 million, you're going to sell me 15% of your company, and we'll meet somewhere in the middle, and there'll be terms around that and a structure around that. until we get to an agreed upon term sheet that we both agree to, or we don't, and we don't get the terms, and they go find capital somewhere else. So it's a give and take negotiation, but when it goes on the platform to raise the capital from the crowd, from the investors, it's already been completely agreed upon. It's a fully structured, agreed upon deal with a term sheet. Everything is signed and sealed. And so the investors coming to the platform see a set of terms that are fully agreed upon.
And the agreement is between the platform and the interested party.
Yeah, the agreement is between the platform and the company, right? And then there's an agreement between the platform and the investors, right? So the investors are investing through us at given terms, which have already been agreed upon with the company. Does that make sense?
But obviously, reward-based is fixed, so there's not much negotiation. So it's like you have usual rates. Lending, it depends on the type of you get a rating basically from the platform. So there's also not so much negotiation. So you just say it's A, B, C, D, or whatever it is. So it's more fixed on the other two platforms types.
When 3 years ago, when loan-based crowdfunding, I started looking at it in the UK, what you would have was auctions where people would actually say how much risk, how much return they were prepared to take as they were looking to fill the loan. That has moved more to the model that my colleague here, my friend here, refers to. I suppose the question mark for me is a few years ago, what the challenge was people may go too low with the rates, and therefore how do you know that the rate actually addressed the risk, because people didn't necessarily fully price that right if you're leaving that to the individual. If there was a high rate, the company could clearly say, look, I'm not ready to take that loan out at that rate. So what you've seen is people moving towards less of an auction, although they do still exist in some areas, and more this A, B, C, D, E profiling. Or in fact, sometimes you actually, just say, do you know what, I'm going to put £100, £1,000 on a platform, and this is the credit rating I want to do, and it diversifies it for you across that platform. So those are a couple of different models to add.
Just one thing crossed my mind on reward-based. There's actually a platform in Germany, one of the most successful ones, and they charge you upfront nothing, so it's optional. It's optional. They say, okay, if you liked, if you like to serve it, if you like the platform, it's up to you what you give. And they run this model now for a couple of years, and they still have the model. So obviously it makes sense for them. It might be an exception, but it works for them.
Any more questions? Okay, before I give them mic to Crystal, I want to thank Ilan.
I want to ask Ilan. Last one, Ilan, 2 minutes, just 2 minutes. What do we experience in Cyprus and through our Startups Hub is that there is a valuation and expectations gap between the startupper and the proposed investors. Meaning that the startupper thinks or he considers that he's worth, I don't know how much, and the investor who wants a specific return is expecting to pay something less. How do you solve this problem in your platform?
Yeah, so I don't think I don't think what you've described is unique to Cyprus. I think that's global. The person who's built the startup thinks he's worth, more than the investors do, and that's great. He should think that. If he doesn't think that, he or she doesn't think that, then you probably have a problem, right? They're building something that they think is going to be, the greatest and the biggest company, and that is what they should think. And investors obviously want to pay as little as possible for what they're investing in. It's completely natural. I think maybe one of the differences here in Cyprus is that since you've got less of an ecosystem right? It's kind of less of a market clearing mechanism, right? So, I mean, how do we deal with it? We just, I have a professional investment team that works with me, and we see hundreds of startups. We have, a huge amount of experience knowing how things are valued. Plus, we see the deals that we don't do, so we see what valuations are looking like in the market. But at the end of the day, I mean, I'm somebody who believes very much in market sources, market factors, right? And there's going to be situations where we just walk away because we think the valuation is wrong. And there are going to be situations where somebody else will come in and say they think that valuation is right. And that's what makes a market, right? I think at the end of the day, though, it's about entrepreneurs who need to raise capital for their business, and they will find the best source of capital that they can get. I will say that one of the things we try to encourage our entrepreneurs to, and we try to educate both entrepreneurs that we're working with and ones that we're talking to, is it's probably not valuable to spend a huge amount of time and effort negotiating over every last percentage point, right? If you're building something big and it's going to be very big, then if you own 18% of your company or 16% of your company, it's not going to matter. And we like to actually see entrepreneurs who are just very focused on building their business and don't get too stuck on every last little bit. At the end of the day, it comes down to the market factors.
I think I have to excuse you. Yeah. Thank you, Milan. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure indeed. I hope we're going to be seeing you more in Cyprus. It's amazing that they have only been once in Cyprus. I want to come again. Please do. Any more questions? Yes, another question.
Hi, Panayotis Pkeri from disruptcyprus.com and disrupteurope.eu. I think maybe Ilan knows the answer, but never mind. What about blockchain, using blockchain technologies in building a crowdfunding platform? Have you seen it happen? Do you think that maybe is the future for crowdfunding?
I think this goes to Andreas first.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. So it's in general, I think in blockchain, it's quite early stage. It's really early stage, and as I mentioned earlier in some of the discussions, there is in Switzerland. It's interesting. We have a couple of startups who actually experience a lot and doing a lot with blockchains, with banks, insurance companies, also crowdfunding. But these are all proof of concepts at the moment. They all say, okay, they see the value, but they also say the scalability is not given yet in the market. So it's it's probably in the future, but it's really early stage. That is my take.
Yeah, I would tend to agree that it's an education program. A lot of this has been discussed in the innovation hubs in some of the banks. Santander has announced that it's doing something within blockchain and it's moving that forward. KPMG Australia actually has its own internal Bitcoin system, which is all to do with if you're walking up sufficient steps, it'll record it on your Fitbit, and then you'll get rewards to be able to buy, I don't know, healthy food, I'd hope, for doing all that or whatever. But I think we're in early stages testing things out and trying to see where the innovation comes. I kind of feel that if you're doing blockchain and crowdfunding at the same time, it might be quite a big challenge. But it's a massive education program, because if you can imagine, people are still getting used to what crowdfunding is, and it's a very, very old concept just being brought up to the forefront again. Imagine, bringing in Bitcoin, blockchain, or whatever you want to call it, and taking that on as well. Now, not to say that, any 21-year-olds or younger here probably will feel a bit more natural with that concept, but I think it will be an education before that does happen.
Great. So, any more questions? Okay, we're going to take a couple. Okay.
Hi, my name is Sani Gugis. from Anagenis Bioenergy Corporation. What's the minimum and the maximum fundraising that requires by a platform? Is it like 10,000, or an investor come, not an investor, I mean an applicant, can he come and request 10 million on his project, let's say, and who controls the funding through that process? And when that funding hits against the goal, does the applicant gets the funding immediately, or he has to wait, or he gets his stages?
Okay, just a very quick recap on what we discussed today. There is, at the European level, regulations that are being enacted are setting minimums and maximums as to the funding rounds that the platforms are engaging on. And then I will leave it to this is what we in Cyprus are going to be trying to implement. Setting the minimums and the maximums for both in terms of the total campaign and what an individual investor can.
So we don't have them yet. We don't have the minimums and maximums yet.
In Cyprus?
Yeah. Cyprus is a part of European Union, right?
No, as I said, the EU doesn't have a nationwide, pan-European legislation. It has existing legislation like the prospectus and the MiFID, which doesn't cover crowdfunding. There are 8 nations that have enacted legislations which sets minimums and maximums. And we discussed that it's, for example, the UK, and Sarah can elaborate more on what the relevant limits are there, but it's essentially 5 million for a round, and there are minimums for uncredited investors, and a maximum an uncredited investor can invest through crowdfunding within a year. So there are limits which aim to protect investors, basically. So, Sarah?
Yeah. In the UK, and again, I know I focus on lending, but that is predominantly the market in the UK. To be honest, I don't really see much. It's normally around 200, 300 grand per pop. It's not to say it doesn't go up or go lower than that. There'll be 30 grand fundraisers or whatever. I would question if you're asking for a couple of grand on a crowdfunding website. Why? Because you generally have your friends and your close allies that would help you there. So that would possibly raise some question marks for me. The maximum is really driven by the EU prospectus laws. I don't know the absolute number off the top of my head.
In the UK, it's 5 million.
5 million. See, you don't know the UK market. But
so that's the maximum, the 5 million UK.
So that would trigger you having to do a prospectus and going through all that. If you're below that maximum, then you're absolutely fine.
Also, you look at what the market trends are. If you look at the rewards crowdfunding space, it's a really great fit for seed stage. I mean, the bread and butter of the rewards-based business is between 5 and 100 grand is the bulk of the activity. You have a lot of breakout hits that get a lot of press, stuff that hits 6 figures or 7 figures in pre-orders, and those can get very loud and buzzy, but they're generally speaking outliers. So I think the reward space works really well for folks in the very early stages, or they're launching a new product and want to take as little risk as possible to see if there's market support for it.
Sorry, I should have said one other point. There is a trend towards now providing working capital facilities. So that would change your minimum, because what the platforms are trying to do is maybe get to a point where you can draw down as and when you need the financing, which then means that you don't have, this 40 grand sitting in your bank account today, but actually you only need 3 grand today, 20 grand tomorrow, back to 2 grand. So
like a project financing kind of thing.
That sort of thing, yeah. How they actually give comfort over the security of that asset, that's a good question. I wouldn't, at the moment, I don't know. It's generally over the assets in the company, or the directors would have to give a guarantee, or there'd be some personal guarantee on that. But there are changes to the models and how things would work in the future.
So if somebody is requesting the £5 million maximum per se,
I've not seen that.
It's better off to do in stages then.
I've never seen anybody go for that size. Like I said, it's generally on a lending side, 200, 300 grand. It might be a little bit more if you're looking at property, but certainly not up to the likes of the 5 million.
I can just support this because the question is, if you have 1 million plus, you typically go to a bank. That is because it's then easier. It's most of the time it's then cheaper again. So in Switzerland, for example, we see we have a funding gap below 250,000 Swiss francs, where crowdfunding can very well fit the gap. But above this 250,000 Swiss francs, it's typically banks are very efficient. So.
All right. One more question, if I may, and I'll let you go. What's a typical return a crowdfunder investor is looking for? Assumably there is $1 million out there. Are they looking for a percentage every year, or are they looking for a one-off and they exit?
I think it really depends. I think there are 4 reasons that somebody puts their money into a campaign online. Number 1 is the people. So you either know the people, know of the people, are excited by the people, and that's kind of your main motivator. Number 2 is the purpose. You like what they're all about. Maybe they're, we had somebody crowdfund on our block in New York City. They were using crowdfunding to help revitalize what was an old building and turn it into a coffee shop. That's something that's a great crowdfunding project. The purpose is the key driver. The third one is the product. So you want to get your spring-powered sneaker or your watch before anybody else does, so you pre-order it. And then the 4th reason would be the profit, right? I want to take my $1,000 and turn it into a lot more. Those will sometimes bleed into each other, but it's not, those are kind of the different factors. It's not always just the return.
Great.
I was going to just say something, sorry. Just focusing on the return, I think the one thing you do need to be careful of is this is an asset class, this is an alternative, but you need to be aware of it in terms of a diversified portfolio. So the return that you're talking about there, it could be an 8% return if you've got an A+, I'm coming up with the numbers here, or it could be an 18% return because you've got quite a risky loan that there's some question marks around it. The point for me is that the investor needs to be aware of the risks they're taking on, why they're doing it, which goes to your points 1 to 3. And then it's part of a diversified risk portfolio which correlates to the risk that they're prepared to take. So it's tricky to say there is a one-size-fits-all. I think you need to think about each individual investor and what it looks like in their portfolio.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. I would like to thank each and everyone individually. Brian, amazing to have you. We're excited. Thank you very much for putting the music to our ears. Your music to our ears. Now you make me curious, and I want to actually hear with your music. So, Andreas, thanks very much. All the best, and hope we keep in touch. In terms of we want to keep in touch with Brian as well. Obviously, with Swisscom, with what they are doing. Sarah, you are a star. Thank you very much for coming. I cannot believe you are from the UK and it's the first time you come in Cyprus. So you are an exception to the rule. And of course, Irene, which, without her, probably we wouldn't have been here. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. Have a great afternoon and a great rest of the week.